Ancient India moves at its own pace, so the age of steam has been a long time passing. Even now, the world's second largest railway system, carrying 10 million people every day, is reluctant to part with the past. But there are no full stops in India. The railways have announced the death of steam, but is it dead or is it still passing away? Steam engines played a vital role in holding British India together. They moved the soldiers who defended the Raj and the civil servants who administered it. They carried the Viceroy and all his staff from his winter capital in Calcutta to his summer capital in the mountains in Simla. And of course, they moved the exports to the ports, which made the whole venture profitable. The railways united this vast and diverse country under one government for the first time in its history. They became a symbol of the Raj. The grandest of the Governor-Generals, Lord Dalhousie, presided over the opening of the railway age in India. He'd seen the chaos and financial disaster of Britain's War of the Gauges between railway companies laying tracks of different widths, and warned against a repetition in India of what he called those great evils. Lord Dalhousie decided that India's national gauge should be 5 foot 6 inches wide, which is almost a foot wider than the British gauge, and that allowed the railways to run monster engines like this one. But unfortunately, his successors didn't heed his wise words. They allowed a meter gauge network to grow up as well. Now, this is the broad gauge track, and that's the meter gauge track. And you can see the gap between them, and you can imagine the problems that that has caused to Indian railways. And as if this meter gauge problem wasn't enough, there also emerged a tiny gauge. In fact, more than one tiny gauge. Some people called the tiny gauge toy trains, but I can assure you they were not. Engines like this used to perform the all too serious task of pulling me up the hill to school in Darjeeling. And this sort of engine is still running on the Darjeeling line, although they're more than 100 years old now. Darjeeling's railway is scheduled to survive for tourists, along with its sister hill station line at Ooty in the south. The other narrow gauge lines dotted around India have not been so lucky. Road improvements are making them too unprofitable even for the soft-hearted management of Indian railways. Where tarmac comes, buses are bound to follow. Passengers deserted this train near Nagpur for faster, if not so comfortable, transport. The crew prepared for their onward journey, but there was only one passenger left on board. He'd paid just 2 rupees, the price of a cup of tea, hardly enough to run a railway on. This rural line in West Bengal stood little chance of survival with its wheezing little engines built in Glasgow before the First World War. Narrow gauge trains move at the speed of the countryside, providing services the intercity trains don't. But hangers-on are a luxury the railways can ill afford. The The humble branch line to Rainagar vanished from the timetable in 1997. Tiny trains serving remote areas were always bit-part actors in the great railway panorama. Centre stage was occupied by Dalhousie's grandiose broad gauge, whose oversized engines puffed pompously around India. They were nearly all made by British manufacturers enjoying the protected market afforded by imperial preference, and Indian railways were their biggest customers. After the Second World War, as independence approached, the old order changed, and bullet-nosed giants imported from America began to haul the great transcontinental expresses. But by 1950, just 3 years after independence, India had started to manufacture its own locomotives. Surprisingly, they didn't celebrate this achievement by giving their locos glamorous names. They just called them WP, for working passenger. They were still to be seen in the capital Delhi as recently as 1994. But they looked a little sad, not surprising, as by then they'd suffered the humiliation of carrying local passengers and their shopping. Scenes reminiscent of a wet day in Crewe survived even longer north of Delhi. The railway lines around Jalandhar in the north were amongst the last to be served by the disappearing steam engine. These broad gauge veterans served out their time in the backwaters of the Punjab until 1995. With them survived the politeness of less hurried days and the old camaraderie of the railways. Joginder Singh was a senior steam driver, which entitled him to drive expresses. But by the end of his career, there was only one steam express left in the whole of India, on the branch line to Hoshiarpur. It only qualified as an express because it missed out a few stops en route. But at least Joginder could imagine himself back on the main line, charging non-stop through the minor stations, whistling importantly as he went. This is the sort of single-track line Thomas the Tank Engine would have fought for to his last drop of water. But used to being the centre of attention, Thomas might not have been so happy about the rival line-side attractions. India had plenty of coal, but only limited oil supplies, and that favoured steam. It had plenty of unemployment too, and steam is labour intensive. Steam had byproducts, which benefited the poorest of the poor. But steam's infrastructure needed massive investment to prevent its collapse. Steam's infrastructure has now finally collapsed in Jalandhar, one of the last broad-gauge sheds. Weeds grow where drivers once tended their engines. Joginder Singh no longer drives his steam-hauled express. He's now retired and doesn't have much respect for the craft that has replaced his. How many years did you drive a steam engine for? कितने साल आपने चलाया?
I am a steam driver from 70.
From 1970 till 1995?
From 1995 तक फिर मैं combined चलाते रहे. हमने 23 types of engine पर काम किया.
23 types of engine you drove?
Steam engine is not a बच्चों का खेल.
Not a children's game.
हाँ children.
It's a man's job, right?
मतलब हमारे यहाँ कहावत है कि ड्राइवर के 4 आंखें.
A driver has to have 4 eyes.
2 ये है 2 पीछे.
Yes.
और इधर भी देख जाएगा, इधर भी देखेगा, इधर भी देखेगा. All time.
But for a diesel driver, 2 is enough. Do kafi hai. Smart new diesels have now taken over the branch line trains Joginder Singh ended his career on, leaving one man employed but unemployed.
All steam drivers have been converted into diesel loco.
And what about yourself?
I am still in the steam loco without loco.
You're the superintendent of steam locos with no locos.
Without loco, yes.
But Chetapal Singh is not entirely bereft of steam. He's proud to exercise his skill even on this Heath Robinson contraption, the old coal crane which has been kept for moving stores. The old ways haven't entirely disappeared from Jalandhar. But the trains are now modern and reservations are now computerized, so I can be reasonably sure I've got a seat on the express back to Delhi. It wasn't ever so.
For the kind attention of the passengers who have just joined us at Jalandhar city. You are welcome on 2014 Amritsar New Delhi Shatabdi Express. The 373 kilometer journey from Jalandhar city to New Delhi will take 4 hours and 35 minutes. We wish you a pleasant journey. Thank you.
230 miles for £7 with dinner thrown in. Not a bad bargain.
This is one of the fastest trains in India, isn't it? Yes, yes. This is the fastest train in India.
There's no restaurant car nowadays, just a sort of takeaway on wheels. But at least everyone gets fed. One expatriate returning from Australia wasn't entirely happy with all this modernity.
So when you came back to India, did you expect to find fast trains like these? Well, I did, but I'm a bit disappointed with this one. I mean, I knew that there were no more steam trains, but this is just, look at it, you can't see anything. You know, my hope was that I would sit and I could open the window and feel the fresh air in my face and smell the countryside. And when I was young, when I was 13, we used to travel in steam trains, and my memories as, like of travel are still, sitting on wooden seats and, bringing your own bedding and sort of relaxing and playing cards on the train and looking outside, and it's all changed. It's just, I think they're trying too hard to copy the Western ways.
But India's modern railways remain still very Indian. Although the emphasis is now on modernity, India still values its railway heritage more than most countries do. I was shown round their museum by no less a person than the chairman of the railway board, Mr. M. Ravindra.
And our history is history of India. We have come very close to the viceregal dining car. Why not we have a look inside?
I'd love to. Let's have a
Please
look.
come in. Please come in.
Yes.
Yes.
You're the modern viceroy. I asked the chairman why, with so much cheap coal available, steam couldn't be kept on.
It wouldn't be possible. For one, it is costly, and for another, it is labor intensive.
And what about the ability to pull trains? Does it have that ability to pull the trains you've got?
No, it can't haul more than 10, 12 coaches.
And of course you have 22 coaches on this.
Yeah, and we have gone...
I was on one recently, actually.
Yes, in fact, we operate trains with 24 and 26 coaches now.
Really?
Yes, it's not possible. And
poor old steam couldn't do that.
Yeah, and increase of speed is not possible. You can't operate a steam locomotive at over 100 kilometers an hour.
I can see what the chairman means about needing longer trains. It came as no surprise when the press around the world wrote the obituary of Indian steam. But what you read in the papers isn't necessarily true. I've been told by one person who claims to be a reliable source that there are still steam passenger services operating on one section of Indian Railway. And that's why I've come to Ratlam to find out whether that's true. Ratlam is a junction where passengers change from the broad gauge to the metre gauge. It's on the metre gauge that I've been told that I may still find some steam. Ah yes, now there's a train from Mhow due in at any moment, and that should, according to my information, be steam. Oh no, it's a diesel. I've come all this way, 700 or 800 miles, just to see a diesel. So I retire injured. An ordinary retiring room above the station would cost me £1, but a deluxe with a hot shower is only £1.50 extra. So I'll opt for that. Wait a minute. Surely that's a locomotive whistle I can hear. So that's where the missing steam engine got to. This is one occasion when I don't mind pollution. I'm told it won't be leaving for about 4 hours, which gives me time to hit the town, such as it is. Ratlam is a town which wouldn't figure on any map if it wasn't for the railway. The most important building is the divisional railway headquarters. What matters in Ratlam is not how many goals you score or runs you make, but how much fuel you save. Ratlam isn't exactly the place where it's at, but wherever you go in India, there's always something unusual to see. Ratlam does have its own speciality too. It's renowned for its savouries, which are sold far and wide. The tea shop is the place to find out whether anything more is happening.
बाहर में है मतलब फॉरेन कंट्री में मतलब अच्छा 50% यहाँ से गया था
Unemployment is the problem in Ratlam.
20%
50% are out of work, and apparently another 20% have gone abroad to countries like Saudi Arabia. One thing is certain: when steam goes, there'll be even less work to go around. This is classified as unskilled work, although it requires great skill, balance and poise to carry headloads with such grace. Many jobs which are certainly skilled will also go with steam. Steam engines have to be brought into the workshops for frequent overhauls, providing employment for boiler makers, wheelwrights, steam fitters, welders, and a host of other trades. Diesels require far less maintenance, so there'll be no work for many of these men when steam finishes. Trains on the meter gauge are slow and infrequent, but that doesn't deter passengers. India is still not in the motor car age, so the railway remains the first choice for most travellers. They provide plenty of business for those that make their livelihood on the platform. And it seems the town wouldn't have any milk without the train I'm about to take. There's no such thing in India as a milk train, so the milkmen or doodwallers have to make do with the local passenger service. Despite hours of preparation in the yard, there still seem to be some last-minute problems with our engine. Eventually, we're declared fit to proceed, and train number 89 gets underway. It's 88 miles from Ratlam to Mhow, and our booked time for the run is 5 hours and 5 minutes. According to my calculations, that makes our average speed 17.5 miles an hour. But our train is still classified as fast passenger. I wonder what the speed of a slow passenger is. One of the milkmen or doodwallers told me he used the train because the roads were so bad the buses were even slower. There's no piped music, but there is in-train entertainment. Although it's a single-track railway, there's no danger of a head-on collision. The station master sees to that. He can only release one of these tokens at a time, and the driver can't pass through the station without it. The token is attached to a hoop so that the driver can pick it up as he comes into the station. There's no buffet car, but plenty of time for a cup of tea at one of the many stops en route.
ये रेलगाड़ी रोज there होता है रोज there है ठीक टाइम पर कभी नहीं जाता है
At least there's some transport to meet passengers, unlike rural stations in so many countries which regard themselves as more advanced. And for those with their own transport, there are park and ride facilities too. From the comparative comfort of my third-class carriage to the rigours of the cab. It takes non-stop sweat and toil to keep the train moving. The problems of an Indian engine crew are compounded by poor quality coal. It produces so much clinker, the fire has to be riddled while the engine is rattling along. A hazardous job only undertaken in other countries when the engine is stationary. All this effort only just succeeds in keeping up the steam pressure. The driver has to supervise all the activity. Now I understand what my friend the driver in Jalandhar meant by needing 4 eyes. Passengers avoiding an encounter with a ticket collector sit at a discreet distance from our engine in full cry. The next stop is Fatehabad Chandrawatiganj Junction. Quite a mouthful. Perhaps India's answer to Lamfair PG. The Dudwallers will miss steam. Diesels won't be much use for rinsing out the milk churns. This is the end of the line for the Dudwallers, but they'll be back to catch tomorrow morning's milk train. Train 89 terminates at Mhow, and we're told this is as far as steam runs. The town is just as unremarkable as Ratlam, but it does seem cleaner and tidier. Perhaps this is because it's a garrison town, and the army is the one orderly institution in a disorderly country. In spite of more than 50 years of independence, the British Indian Army is still fondly remembered. The cemetery where many British soldiers were buried is well tended. With the passing of empire, most of the regiments of the men buried here have now disappeared or been amalgamated. But their names are still commemorated in Mhow. The railways of the Raj too. I was summoned to the station to meet the divisional railway manager, Mr. Godbole, uncrowned king of the railways of the Ratlam division. His personal carriage was parked in a siding.
This is a map of the various sections of this railway, is it?
Yeah.
The railway we just travelled on yesterday.
That's right. And these indicate the years the line was laid, like this 1874, 1874, 1873.
And here's
Mr. Godbole is an engineer who once managed the Western Railway's steam locomotive workshops.
Ah, yes.
How does someone so closely connected with steam feel about its demise?
I would say it is sad as far as the romance part is concerned, but one has to face the realities.
You have to be a realist, I can be a romantic.
That is right. Because after all, to bid goodbye to something you loved all your life is really painful. But one has to do it.
Once again, I'm reminded that facts in India are like eels. Just as you think you've grasped them, they slip out of your hand. Although the line ahead is officially diesel only, just beyond Mhow there's a steep descent to the plains. Diesels get down without any difficulty. Climbing back, they need a helping push from steam. One engine is prepared for the job every day. I'm highly honoured because it's been specially decorated for my visit. The engine usually goes down the hill solo, but today it's taking Mr. Godbolly's inspection car along too. There's a daily unscheduled stop to pray for divine protection on the dangerous descent ahead. But the crew don't put all their trust in the gods. They check the brake pressure as well. Not many are privileged to get this view of the valley, travelling in VIP comfort. But the going isn't so good for all Mr. Godbolly's retinue. At the bottom of the hill, the VIP treatment continues. But I'm sure it's really Mr. Godbolly, not me, the station master's trying to impress.
The local sweet here, it is known as Kalakan. Actually, Kalakund, if I were to really convert it into English terminology, it will be black food.
Yes.
Kala is black and
Yeah.
Kund means food.
Yes.
So like you have black food.
Very big piece as well.
Okay. Yeah. Try out.
After we've had our sweetmeats, Mr. Godbolly tries to drum into my hopelessly unmechanical head some understanding of the workings of steam.
The position of this block
Yes.
will move nearer to the center.
Oh, I see.
So
Yes.
it is very little port opening.
Yes.
When it is at the top, it is moving
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
So more ports are opening at both the strokes.
Eventually, train number 9672, the so-called fast passenger to Ajmer, pulls in. Passengers are given a welcome opportunity to stretch their legs and, of course, have a cup of tea. Then our picnic ends and the hard work really starts. The first job is to keep up with the rather more nippy diesel. But then the gradient begins to tell, and the diesel really needs our help. I've just got to hang on for dear life. It's hard to enjoy the view. How am I going to survive in the narrow tunnel ahead? Surely I'll be asphyxiated by the smoke. But survive we all do, and continue helping the train up the hill. And so we conquer the ascent to Mhow. I'm not sure who's the more exhausted, the engine or its freeloader. But that isn't to be the end of my journey. I soon find myself back on the broad gauge again. Having found what I thought was the last steam in India, the divisional railway manager in Rutland said he thought there might be some more in a part of the country so remote that the British left it to the local Maharajahs to build all the railway lines. It's a day's journey from Ratlam to the Rann of Kutch on the Arabian Sea. Vankaniya was one of the former princely states in this area served by the railway. The Maharajah's capital is now a not very significant town in the west of Gujerat state. Vankaniya was one of the first stations where I'd ever seen a lady porter. It seems a bit ungentlemanly to accept her services, but then perhaps that's not politically correct. Anyhow, she's anxious to carry my luggage, so I suppose I should go along with it. Clean shoes are a must to meet the Maharajah. I can't keep him waiting by train spotting. The Maharajah's palace dominates the town. I feel a bit like a Maharajah myself, driving through in what seems to be the town's only motor car. The Maharajahs always kept themselves apart from their subjects. I'm privileged to be greeted by the Maharajah of Vankaniya himself. He waited years for his turn to rule the state, but was pipped at the post by independence. He bears his disappointment with great dignity. I'm to stay in the guest house, built in the 1930s and apparently not touched since. My room is distinctly Art Deco. Despite the peeling plaster, it could be in the Savoy or the Adelphi. It made the retiring room at Rutland seem like a bad dream. I even had my own study. The palace itself seemed like a souvenir of past Maharajas' European grand tours. A mad mélange of Gothic, Moorish, Venetian and Romanesque, with a bit of Mughal and Hindu thrown in to remind us we're in India. Before independence, the Maharajas were great hunters, but that's no longer fashionable. And Digvijay Singh, the modern crown prince, is an ardent environmentalist.
So he might bolt with it?
No.
He's also preserving the local traditional breed of horses.
There.
It's those pointed ears, isn't it? They should almost meet at the top.
They must meet on top, and the third feature is the concave profile.
Yes. And is this something only Kathiawar ponies will do?
They're born revalas. You must have a lot of patience with animals. If you want him to do perform with his ears. Hey! There.
Oh, lovely. Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. Isn't it beautiful?
Yes.
Although India is now a democracy, the 91-year-old Maharaja is still proud of his family's regal past, whose trappings included their own royal train.
The photo here is a photograph of a special train, but some of the carriages are not Vankaniya carriages. Some of the carriages
Not at that time, we didn't have one.
You didn't have one?
No, this was 1917. We actually got it, I remember, in about the year that I went to England for my education in 1922.
Do you remember travelling in that carriage?
Oh yes, of course. We had it till till the integration.
What was it like travelling in the carriage?
Oh, it's very nice and very comfortable.
You had all your own saddles there and
Yes,
everything?
it had 60 feet long. It's a very nice one. It was state color blue.
With the shield on the front?
When the railways were built, Digvijay's grandfather was only a boy, with a British administrator in charge. A situation the neighbouring state of Mhow was quick to exploit.
The story goes that the administrator was bought off by the Morvi ruler, and railway lines were put in all the three directions from Waikaner, with no advantage or no compensation to the Waikaner state.
No revenue compensation?
No revenue compensation, nor even compensation of land acquired, nor participation in the profits of the railway.
But in the end, Waikaner has won, hasn't it? Because Mhow is only a small station on a branch line, whereas Waikaner is a junction on the main line and has a train right through to Delhi and indeed right up to Kashmir.
There is such a thing as the law of nemesis.
The Crown Prince can rejoice in his view of the through train to Delhi. The Mhow Railway is now just a freight branch line, still on the meter gauge. And it's at Waikaner that the goods, consisting mainly of sacks of salt, have to be lugged from one gauge to another. Goods trains are usually thought of as rather drab compared with passenger expresses. But for the enthusiast, steam freight in India is a real find. The guard seems to welcome company on his lonely journey to the salt marshes. His round trip is 80 miles, but it could take him over 12 hours. Although Indian railways carry millions of passengers every day, goods trains are the main revenue earners. Rail still moves 40% of the nation's freight. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. This should have been life for me. Bowling through the countryside, well, perhaps I should say proceeding through the countryside on the back of a goods train. Although I know that the driver's job is a glamorous one, recent experience has taught me that I could never have put up with all that bone shaking and, of course, the hard work. But then if I had become a goods guard, I'd probably be redundant by now. Because, sadly, modern freight trains don't need guards vans like this one. They're just one more colourful relic of the railway age, which has been sacrificed to speed, efficiency, and, of course, cost-cutting. Of course, there's a downside even to steam train riding, and that's the smut in your eye. The Mhow Maharajah seems to have had ideas above the status of the small kingdom he ruled. Even the station built by the Morvi Maharajah looks like a palace, a branch line rival to the great main line termini such as Bombay Victoria. Morvi is where the salt line really starts. This magnificent station, worthy of a Maharaja who ruled a rather bigger state, was only opened when the line was extended to the salt pans to cope with that traffic. The ceremony was conducted by Mr. C. Latimer of the Indian Civil Service. He was posted in this area by the British Raj. His job was to keep an eye on the multiplicity of Maharajas who ruled this part of India. Times moved on. The British Raj and the Maharaja don't command much respect nowadays. After a long wait at Morvi, for what I'm not quite sure, the signalman gives us the right of way for the next stage of our journey. Passengers are a rare sight at Dahinsara, the last station before the salt pans. But there's still the full panoply of a station master, his staff and his antiquated equipment.
Hello.
In this station, they feel they'll be losing not just engines, but old friends when steam goes.
My pointsman can recognize the whistle and he can say so and so number steam engine is coming. He can differentiate the whistle's number of powers.
The salt pans themselves are desolate places, neither land nor sea. It was to protest against the salt tax that Mahatma Gandhi took his legendary Long March. He usually conducted his campaign against the British by train. So perhaps it's appropriate that salt should be the last commodity hauled by the steam engines that played such a part in his struggle for independence. The competition from road has reached this remote corner of the country. If steam isn't sacrificed, Indian railways will not survive. So, steam's Indian summer has to come to an end.